speak English like a native. Join my VIP program. Join it at effortlessenglishclub.com. effortlessenglishclub.com. I'm live on YouTube for our book club lesson, continuing with our Effortless English book club lesson that's on the weekends. We are doing Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And today, Chapter 2B, meaning the second half, the second part of Chapter 2. Those of you who are joining live, hello. I will get to your questions. I'll look at your comments. I will look at your questions later in the show. First, I'm going to do the book, teach the book, and then I'll come back and look at comments and questions. So if you're watching live, relax, listen, focus on the book, and then we'll come and do some questions at the end. All right, let's start. Let's continue with our book, shall we? Here we go. Chapter 2B. So we did the first half of Chapter 2 last week, and we learned about assets and liabilities. Let's continue from there. So, this part begins, how the quest for a financial dream turns into a financial nightmare. Quest is like a mission, a goal. So what this means, beginning this section, it means most people are looking for a financial dream, to be rich, to be financially free, something like that. They have a dream, a financial dream, right? They want, maybe they want to have a certain lifestyle. Maybe they want to travel the world. I don't know. But most people do have some kind of financial goals or dreams. But he says for most people, the dream becomes a nightmare. It becomes terrible. It becomes financial slavery. He's right, of course. Let's continue. And now he tells the story. He begins telling the story of most people. What do most people do? And he's describing really most Americans. He's American, so he's describing kind of the typical case in America, probably in many other countries also. So he says, usually what happens is a young couple will get married. So it starts with a young couple getting married. And they move in together into a small apartment. This is kind of our typical story, he's saying. So the young couple gets married, they move in together into a small little apartment. And because now they're living together, two people living in one apartment, they actually can save a little money, especially if they both are working. So they begin saving money, and they decide to save money for their dream home, so they can have kids. So they want to buy a house. That's the first thing they save money to do. Save money to buy a house. So they start doing that. And gradually their income goes up for most people, right? They get a raise. They start to make more money. Over several years, they start to make money. But the problem is, as their incomes go up, their expenses go up as well. So they make $300 more per month. What do most people do? They spend $300 more. They make $500 more per month. Then they spend $500 more per month. So the expenses always rise equally with their extra income. This has some problems. He says the number one cost for most people is taxes. Taxes, that's where the largest amount of your money goes. This is true in the United States. It's really true in some countries. Many European countries, for example, huge amount of taxes, very high tax rates. Lots and lots and lots of countries have very high tax rates. So that's the number one thing. That's the number one expense. So guess what? As your income goes up, your taxes also go up. So even more, a larger amount of your money is taken away from you in taxes. This is one big problem. He says, so continuing our story of the typical people, the typical couple. Eventually they buy their house. And when they buy a house, finally, guess what? They get a new tax called a property tax. I don't know if all countries have property taxes. I think most do. But he's pointing out again that not only they buy a house, usually with a loan, right? They're not just buying it completely. They get a loan from a bank. They buy their first house. Now they have even more tax because they're paying their income tax. Now they have to pay an extra tax called a property tax. So their taxes go up even more because they bought that house. So now their liabilities have gone up a lot, right? Their liabilities column is full of mortgage and credit card debt. If you're watching instead of listening, you can see in the diagram that we learned last week, liabilities have gone up, right? You have a house, a mortgage means a house payment, a loan payment for a house. And the expenses have gone up also. And their income has gone up, right? If they're getting better jobs. And he says now they are trapped in the rat race. They are trapped in the rat race. We mentioned the word rat race, or the slang rat race, last week. The rat race is basically wage slavery. It's economic slavery is what it is. So it's like you're a little rat. It's kind of the idea, how rats or hamsters, in a cage, they have that wheel. And they just run on the wheel, but they don't go anywhere. They just run, running on the wheel. And the wheel just goes around and round, but the rat or the hamster or the mouse never actually moves forward. They're using all this energy. They're going, but they're going nowhere. That's what the rat race is, financially. You're working 40 hours a week or more. Working for years and years and years, and yet you never become financially free. You're always this wage slave. That's what he calls the rat race. It's never-ending work. He says, then again, what the typical couple does, they usually get credit cards. They'll get credit cards in the mail, applications, or they get credit card applications other places. So they start getting credit cards. They start buying things with their credit cards. Then now they have the debt, the payments on the credit cards. So their debt, their liabilities go up even more. And it just goes up and up and up. And then maybe eventually they decide their income goes up higher. And they decide, now we can buy a more expensive house. So they sell their first house and they buy an even bigger one with, of course, a bigger loan. And now they've got to pay that. And then they get more credit cards and the credit card limits go up. Now they're paying more on the credit card debt. So it's never ending. Each time their income goes up, the loans, the debts, the expenses go up because they keep buying these liabilities, bigger houses, cars, credit card debt. And then Robert says, usually when I meet these couples, they come to my seminar or they meet me. And the first thing they always ask me, can you tell us how to make more money? Can you tell us how to make more money? And then Robert in the book says, they don't understand. They don't understand their trouble is not more money. That's not enough money. That money is not the problem. Not having an income is not their problem. They don't understand. Their problem is how they spend their money that they have already. Their problem is their spending. So just making more money will not help them. And this is true for most people. Most people think, if I just make more money, then I will be better financially. Then I'll be more free, finally, financially. But it's actually not true for most people. Give them more money, they will just spend more. And he says, why do people do this? Then he asks the question, next in the book, he asks the question, why? What is the reason? Like, why do people do this? Because it doesn't work. It obviously creates a lot of money stress, financial stress. Why does everybody do this? Or almost everybody? Why do most people follow this same pattern? And he's right. Certainly in the United States, and I think in most of the world, this is what people do. In the middle class, at least. And he says the reason is most people follow the crowd. He says basically the problem is most people don't think. Most people never, ever think. They never even ask the questions, is this the right way to do it? They're told this is the right thing to do, right? This is the advice they get from, I don't know, banks, from media, from parents, and they never even question it. They just follow it and do it. And he says the other problem is most people are afraid to be different. Most people are afraid to be different because of the school systems, parents, and media. They're afraid to look for solutions to problems because then they would be different. So they just do the same as everybody else. And it doesn't matter if they're making a little money like they're teachers or if they're lawyers or doctors, they all follow the same pattern, almost all. He says the problem is, like he talks about being in school, how he and his friend Mike, they started to have problems in school in high school age, which is interesting because I did too. I had good grades, but I started to fight with my teachers, argue with my teachers. And he said the teacher would always say, if you don't get good grades, you won't do well in the real world. So the teacher would always tell him, if you get bad grades, then in the real world, you will do badly. You'll have do badly with money. You won't do well. You won't be successful if you get bad grades in school. And he said, because he was learning from Rich Dad the truth about money, he would just kind of laugh and realize the teachers were idiots. The teachers were fools. They knew nothing about money, and they were 100% wrong, that getting good grades was not the secret to being rich, and getting bad grades doesn't matter. And he talked to Rich Dad about it, Mike, his friend's dad, and Rich Dad said, schools are designed to produce good employees instead of employers. He's 100% correct about that. Employees. Schools create employees, workers. Schools produce workers, employees. They train everyone to be good, obedient, rule followers, to follow the rules, to be good employees. They do not teach you how to be an employer, in other words, an owner. Schools do not train you to be an owner, to own your own business, to be free, to be independent. Not at all. He's 100% right about that. So then he kind of gives a summary here about most people's pattern, most people's habits with money. Number one, most people work all of their lives paying for a house that they never own. Think about that. It's kind of crazy, really. Most people, all of their lives, talking about more than one person. So most people work all of their lives paying for a house that they never own. They just keep paying for the loan, paying for the loan, paying for the loan. Before they own the house, they buy another one that's more expensive, keep paying the loan, paying the loan, paying the loan. And most people do that for their whole lives, and they never, ever own the house 100%. He says, one of the problems with this is because houses are expensive, so if all of your savings, if all of your extra money is put into a house, you cannot use that money to buy an asset, something that will actually make money, right? So you're missing a huge opportunity if you focus on buying a house, which is a liability, which is an expense, which costs you money. So he's not a fan. He really does not like this idea of focusing on buying a house, because he says a house is a liability. A house is a liability. It costs you money. It takes your money, takes money away from you. It makes you more poor, not more rich. Then he gives us a little summary why the rich get richer. The rich get richer. Yes, we all know this, but people act like this is some big secret. Like, well, how do they do it? Like it's some big evil secret. It's not. It's just very simple. He says they buy assets. They buy assets. That's why the rich get richer. They buy assets, right? An asset is something that makes money. It might be a business. It might be stocks that pay dividends. It might be real estate that you get rental income from. Whatever it is, they buy an asset that creates income, positive cash flow it's called, right? Means more money coming to you. When they get that extra money from the asset, they don't go spend it immediately on a big, expensive, cool car or something like that. No, what do? They take that extra money, they buy another asset. Now they have even more extra money. What do they do with that extra money? They buy another asset. They just keep buying assets. Buying assets. They get richer and richer and richer. So he gives the advice, exactly the advice I give, although I'm very strong about this advice, that the first thing you must do is keep your liabilities and expenses down, right? You want to lower your liabilities, lower your expenses as low as possible so that you'll have extra money for buying assets. This is the very simple formula. So he gives another little summary here, kind of the very sad situation. If you ignore his advice, if you don't listen, if you are an employee working for someone else, and you also are a homeowner, you buy your own house and pay the loan, then number one, you're not working for yourself. Number one, you work for three groups, not for yourself. You are working for three groups. Number one, you're working for your company. Obviously, if you're an employee, you work for a company. And he says, guess what? If you're working for a company, you are making the owner of the company rich. You're making the company owners rich or the shareholders rich, not yourself. They are getting rich from your work. As an employee, you're making them rich. Number two, you are working for the government because the government takes a huge amount of taxes from employees. Usually business owners pay smaller percentage of taxes than employees. So by being an employee, you are working for the government. You are paying the majority of taxes. And number three, if you own your own house, which means you have a bank loan, then you're working for the bank. You're working for the bank to pay the bank that loan and, of course, the extra money they charge for the loan. So you're working for the company to make them rich. You're working for the government to make all those people rich. And you're working for the bank to make them rich. You're not making yourself rich. This is the problem, being an employee and just buying a house. So he talks about, how can you become wealthy? What is wealth, right? We're using two different words here, rich and wealth, rich and wealthy. And I mean, in the dictionary, they're very similar, but Robert Kiyosaki is using them differently. Robert Kiyosaki is basically saying rich is having a huge amount of money, right? You're super financially free. You've got large amounts of extra money. But he gives an interesting definition of wealth. And basically, when he says wealth, for me, it's financial freedom. It's the same meaning. Wealth equals financial freedom. So he's saying, how do you know if you're wealthy? What's the definition? How can you know? He says, it's not a number. He says there's a very easy way to decide. He says, ask yourself, if I stopped working today, right? You quit your job today. How long could you survive? How long could you survive with no job? So he's saying wealth is measured in time, not money, right? So it depends on your expenses, obviously. So, if you quit your job today and 2 weeks from now you have zero money and you're going to starve to death, then you have 2 weeks of wealth. That's it. If you could live 6 months without a job, you have 6 months of wealth. If you could live 10 years, now you're getting close to being truly wealthy. If you could live the rest of your life with no job, you're wealthy. So he's saying wealth is a measure. It measures your cash flow from your assets. Cash flow is the movement of your cash, right? Flow is moving like water. So remember, asset is something you own that creates money. A liability is something you own that takes away money. So if you own stocks, if you own rental real estate, if you own a business, they all create money. If they create enough money for you to live, to pay all of your expenses, pay for your apartment, pay for your food, pay for everything, you're wealthy. It means you can live the rest of your life without a job. And finally, we're at the end of the chapter. He just reminds us again, it's a summary of the whole chapter, and really a summary of the main point or main points of the book. Number 1, the rich buy assets. Number 2, the poor only have expenses. And number 3, the middle class buy liabilities that they think are assets. All right, and that is it. That is the end of chapter 2. A couple comments, and then we'll go to the questions. So, basically in this second half of the chapter, he's describing in more detail what is wage slavery? What is this financial slavery that so many, the majority, the huge majority, right? Most people are financial slaves. Meaning, they cannot survive without a job. They are employees working for someone else. And without a job, without being an employee, they cannot survive. And of course, if you're an employee, you're not a slave is an exaggerated word, of course. But you're not fully an adult, right? You don't decide your own schedule. Your boss tells you what time you can come and what time you can leave. Your boss decides how much you get paid, not you. Now, you can negotiate, of course. If you're really good at your job, then maybe you can negotiate, or maybe you can go to someplace else and get a higher pay. But there's a limit. You're the company or the boss ultimately decides, will they pay you or not? Also, of course, as an employee, it means that your job security is a little bit weak. If the company needs to cut, they might just cut your job for no reason. Or maybe they have a reason. Doesn't matter, right? You can lose your job. Many people lose their jobs suddenly, and they're surprised. So for all these reasons, he's saying, and I agree with Robert Kiyosaki, that you're not really financially free as long as that is the situation. And so he gives you the formula then that the rich use. Why are rich people financially free? It's because they don't have to work. Now, many of them do work. Many of them enjoy their work. They're working for lots of different reasons, but they don't have to. They could quit their job right now, and they still have lots of money coming in for themselves and their family. They're financially free. All right, let's go to some questions and comments. We're live on YouTube again, so let me just pull these questions and comments up, and we'll see. Well, this is a good point from Umer. People spend more money because human wants are unlimited. Yes, human desires are unlimited. This is what he said. I think it was the beginning of the chapter. He said he identified the two that it's an emotional problem at the bottom. It's greed, or like he said, he likes to use the word desire. So desire, and the other one is fear. These are the roots of the financial slavery. Fear of being different, fear of taking chances, right? Which is what he described in this lesson, the second half of the chapter. He was focusing a little more on the fear of being different, not asking the questions, not trying something different, because afraid to be different than everyone else. And then in the last week, he talked about the greed, about the desire for more, never ending. And he said that will never make you happy. You'll never be happy. Another car will not make you happy. A big house and all that money, that's not going to make you happy. And so he was saying you have to look at the roots of your desire and your fear. And understand that, financial freedom can give you great benefits. Mostly it gives you freedom. That's what you get mostly, is freedom. And then you also get can get more influence in the world, lots of things. But that the money's not going to buy you happiness. It can reduce your stress financially, of course. So there are good benefits, but just getting lots of money will not automatically make you happy. And if you just spend, try to get more, never ending, you're in the rat race still. If you have $1 million every year and you spend $1 million every year, you're still not financially free. This is what, we talked about last week, professional sports. Like a professional basketball player, they might make $5-10 million a year and yet not be financially free because they spend all of it somehow. Like we can't imagine spending that much money. Like, what do they spend the money on? But they do. And then when they retire, when the job is over, they become poor again. It's sad, but this is what Robert Kiyosaki is talking about. Okay, can you give examples of an asset? Yes, I can. So I'll give you the typical examples of assets. What's an asset? So again, remember, Kiyosaki's definition of asset is something that creates income, right? It doesn't take money. You look at your bank account and it adds money to your bank account each month or each quarter. So what's an example of an asset? Number one would be a business. A business is a very good example. So a business that you own, if it's making money, then it's an asset. It's creating income every month. If you run this business, eventually you can create it as a system where you even have managers doing it. So you could take a vacation. You could go for 3 months, travel the world, not work in the business, and the business would continue making money, continue adding money to your bank account. It's an asset. Another example would be rental real estate. So if you buy a house, but you don't live in the house, you don't live in it, you rent it to someone else, and they pay you rent. They pay you every month rent. So if you buy the house, you have a loan. Maybe it's, let's say, $1,000 per month. That's the expense. But if you charge the rent, let's say $2,000 per month, there's a gap, right? You're making $1,000 every month of profit. So that real estate is now an asset. It's adding money to your bank every month. Stocks could be Stocks could be an asset, stock portfolio it's called, a collection of stocks. They pay dividends. They're called dividends, but basically usually every quarter, they will pay a percentage extra, which you get from that stock, from owning that stock, from owning the stock in the company. So it's creating income each month. It's adding. It might be small, but it's still an asset. That's what an asset is. What else? I mean, those are probably the main types of assets. Businesses, real estate, stocks, and bonds. When you die, you can't take nothing to heaven, only in your life. This is true. This is true. But the point is, do you want to be a slave while you're alive, or do you want to be free? And the reason Kiyosaki wrote this book is to teach people to be free, because a lot of people in the world are working jobs where they're unhappy, or they're just working, even if they like the job, they're forced to work quite a long time. They're away from their children. They're away from their families. Some people hate their jobs or really find their jobs boring. Some people would love to quit their jobs, but they can't. Some people would like to have a lot more vacation time and travel the world, but they can't. So some people are very stressed about money during their life. So there are lots of reasons to achieve financial freedom, even if you don't want luxury, if you don't care about that. I personally don't care about it, but I do care about the freedom. My time. As I said last week, I like this definition he has of wealth measured in time, because I 100% agree. That's how I measure wealth or financial freedom too. It's my time. It means I have my time every day. It's not just like how long can I survive. It means each day, who decides what I do each day with my time? I do, right? When I was an employee, my boss did. For a lot of the time, I had to wake up at a certain time. I had to go to work at a certain time. I had to stay there for a certain time. I could not leave if I wanted to keep the job. I had to stay there 40 hours a week, sometimes more. When I was teaching, I had to use their methods of teaching, even though I did not agree with the methods, even though I didn't like the methods, even though I thought the methods were not useful for the students. I still had to follow their system because I was an employee. I wasn't free to teach how I wanted to. If I got sick, I had to get stressed a little bit. If I only had, in the United States, you get maybe 5 sick days or 1 week of sick days for a whole year. So, I got to call them. I'm sick. I'm sorry. I can't come today, and get all the stress about that. And how many sick days have I used this week? For me, a big one was travel and vacation. I love to travel. I wanted to have the time to travel around the world, and not just for 1 week, not just 2 weeks, but for several months. Couldn't do it. Didn't have enough vacation time. So I would just have to quit my jobs, which is what I did do. I just quit my jobs a lot at that time. But, all of these things. Now I'm financially free. I don't care about any of that stuff. If I'm tired one night and don't sleep well, then I just sleep late the next day. I'll wake up at noon if I have to. I don't usually wake up at noon, but if I'm tired, I'll just sleep more. I don't have to call anybody and ask them. I just do it. If I want to travel for 4 months or 6 months, I just do it, right? That's the thing. You become the master of your own life. That's, in my opinion, the reason to be financially free. But of course, you don't have to be. This is always a choice. Yeah, well, here's an excellent next question. The question everybody is probably thinking, and it's a really good point. So let's read it. Pani Wonka. You talk about, what you're talking about is easy to understand, correct? But how do you get the assets? Yes, indeed. How to make your own business when you don't have any special skill. I'm 34 years old with 2 kids and a house on credit. Well, that is the question, isn't it? That is indeed the question. And as you may guess from the question, there are things in life that are simple, but they're not necessarily easy. I'll give you an example. to run an ultra marathon. An ultra marathon is like a super marathon. Let's say you want to run a race, 200 miles. That's, good Lord, I don't know kilos, but it's super long, okay? That would take you probably 24 hours or more, probably more. Is that simple? Is it simple to run that? Very simple. You just take a step, take a step, take a step, take a step. That's it. It's really simple. Is it easy? No, it's super, super, super difficult to go that far running. Right? Well, it's the same idea here. Are these ideas simple? They are simple, but are they easy? No, because you have to learn some skills. This is the hard part. The hard part of this system he's teaching us is creating the asset, right? So, creating a business, guess what? You have to learn business skills. You're going to have to really get in there and learn business skills. This is why I say the first step, in my opinion, this is me, not Robert Kiyosaki. I disagree with him on this. In my opinion, the first step, if you want to be financially free, is to cut your expenses down to the very lowest possible. I call it the baseline. It's the lowest you can survive at and still be fairly happy. Now, as I said, what I did, I lived in my car. If you want to get an idea of what I'm talking about, how low can you cut your expenses? I lived in my car so that I would not pay rent. I lived in a van after that, which is just a big car, basically. For a year, I did that. 0 rent. So I had a huge amount of freedom. I did not have a business at that time. I was still working a little part-time job, but I had a lot of freedom. I worked only a few hours because my expenses were so super low. This is easier to do than to create a business. So I recommend it as the first step. Cut your expenses down to almost nothing if you can, as low as possible. So you've got a house on credit, sell it, is what I would say. If you're serious, sell it. Get rid of your liabilities, as many as you can, all of them if possible. Now, I know most people don't want to live in a car, I understand, but you can cut it down to like a 1-room apartment that's as cheap as possible, so that that's a big expense for most people, is housing. Usually it's the biggest one after taxes. So you cut that down as low as you can. Yet you still want it to be safe. You still want it to be clean. But other than that, that's all you need. Cut it as low as possible. Then the second part, let's say you want to start a business. Start it. You say you're 34 years old. Well, I was 38. I was 38 when I started Effortless English. So age doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter if you're 48 or 68. Doesn't matter. That does not matter at all. So you cut your expenses as low as you can, number one. Then you start a business. Here's the thing. How do you start a business? Just start it. You're saying you don't have the skills. Well, of course you don't. How do you get business skills? By starting a business, by running a business. You learn through experience. The smart way to do this, don't quit your job. Start a business as a side business, as a part-time business, on the weekends, in the evenings, whatever. So you still have the income from your job. You don't just quit your job and then you have no money at all and then pray, I hope the business works. That's crazy. You cut your expenses super low, so the risk is low. And then number two, you start a little business. You start something small, no loans, none of that stuff, something small. And then you learn as you go, and you keep working. Now, what I did is when I started Effortless English, I only worked part-time. I had a part-time job teaching at a school. But the part-time job paid for our expenses, paid for our food. The part-time job paid for our little tiny apartment, small 1-room apartment. So we could survive with just my part-time job. So we weren't going to starve. We weren't going to die or anything, right? If the business failed. And our expenses were super, super, super low. I believe we had the cheapest apartment in San Francisco. We were living in San Francisco. I have never heard of an apartment cheaper than the one we lived in. So I believe it, if not the cheapest, it was certainly one of the cheapest apartments in the whole city. Super cheap. We didn't spend much money on food. Our expenses were super, super low. And then I started Effortless English. In my extra time, I worked only half time at the school, and the other time I worked on the business, and I worked a lot. So in the afternoons and the evenings, I worked on the business. On the weekends, I worked on the business. And, luckily, in about 6 months, the business really grew fast. I quit my job, and it was great. So this is how you do it. That's how you do it. So I don't know about Robert Kiyosaki, but I'm telling you, it's not necessarily easy. You got to do a lot of work. It's work. To start a business is work, and it's a lot of work. So you better love it. You should love it. Investing is also work. You got to learn to invest. I can't give you investment advice because I'm not good at it. Like stock, I'm talking about stocks and bonds, right? So that's, some people buy those as assets. But you got to know what you're doing. There are a lot of skills to learn with that. It's tricky and it can be risky. So you got to learn, and you start with small amounts of money or even no money. You can even do it with fake money to learn the skills. And it's the same with real estate. If Robert Kiyosaki made his money from real estate in the beginning. So, that's buying houses or buying apartments and renting them out. Again, there's a lot to learn in that. I can't teach you that because I also don't know about that. And Alibay saying, same question. If your income is the same as your outcome, how can you break out of the system? You can't. You're a slave. That's what Robert Kiyosaki was just saying at the end of that chapter. If your expenses and your income match, you are a slave. This is the rat race. You're on the wheel like the rat, and you will just work and work and work for your whole life, and you will never get off. The only way to break out is your expenses have to drop so that now your income is higher than your expenses. It's the only way. There's two ways to do this: raise your income or cut your expenses. I think for most people, cutting expenses is the easiest. You can move into a smaller place with less rent. You can sell your car and get a cheaper car or no car. You can stop eating out. You can buy cheaper food. There are lots of things you can do to cut expenses so if it's exactly even, you cut your expenses down as low as possible, then you'll have the extra money to buy assets. And if you later get a raise, the other thing is, if you get more income, like you get a better job or you get a raise at your job, don't spend more. Don't go buy anything new. Don't raise your expenses at all. Instead, save it, and buy an asset. Okay, so then Abdo I gave examples of assets. He's asking now, what about liabilities? Examples. Sure, lots of examples of this. If you're renting an apartment, your rental agreement is a liability, right? Every month it takes money from your bank account, right? You have to pay the rent every month. It's a liability. If you own a house with the house loan, right? You got to pay the bank every month for the house. It's taking money out of your bank account every month. It's a liability, right? Credit card. If you have credit card debt, you buy stuff with the credit card. Now you have to pay that minimum amount every month. That payment, the credit card, is a liability. Car. If you buy a car, most people that buy a new car, they get a loan. They're paying the bank for the car every month. The car is a liability. Even if you buy the car 100% with cash, it's still a liability because with cars, they're expensive. You got to pay gas. You have to pay for repairs sometimes. You have to change the oil, right? You don't make money from the car. The car takes money out, right? It creates expenses. The car is a liability. A liability is anything you own that takes money out of your bank account. So you want to cut those liabilities. You want to get rid of them. If you can, get rid of as many as you can. Now, some you might, you have to live somewhere. So you're going to have some liabilities probably, but you want to keep them as cheap and small as possible. Oh, good. So Smita saying, thanks for doing this book. I've been, excuse me, reading that already in chapter 6. So, reading ahead. Very good. Excellent. What do you want to tell us about Memorial Day sale? Nothing. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, here's a good, actually. Okay, so Tron's saying, I'm a little bit wealthy, kind of laughing. I could survive 6 months if I gave up my job right now, haha. That's good. You're kind of laughing, like 6 months is not much, but actually, if you come, for most people, you're much, much, much better than most people. I don't know about other countries, so I know about the United States. Most people could only survive 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks. A month or less without a paycheck. That I can't remember the percentage, but it's like 80 or 90%. It's a large number of people in the United States. And I'm sure it's similar in many different countries. So 6 months is not bad at all. That's a good start. I can think of my own life when I was younger. Most of my young life until I started my business at 38. So most of my life before age 38, I could not have survived 6 months. No way. I did not have that much savings or assets or anything. I had no assets. So 6 months is a good start. I mean, I know it's not your whole life, so it seems like, well, maybe you might feel like your goal is bigger. You want a long time, but 6 months is pretty good. It's a good start. I mean, you're doing something right. It means you're saving or you're doing something smart. If you can survive 6 months with no job, that's a good start. So I would say just keep doing what you're doing. Keep saving more. Maybe it's time to start buying some assets. Keep cutting your expenses, but that's a nice start. So don't feel bad about that because that's really good. Okay. Umer, people own more liabilities for the future of their children. No, I don't think so. I think you're hurting your children by doing this. Teach your children this information. Teach your children about the truth about money so that they don't grow up and repeat the same mistakes. Everything he's describing in the book, I did it. Before age 38, I did everything Robert Kiyosaki was doing. Well, actually, I didn't. I didn't buy a house because I didn't have enough money to buy a house. But I had no assets at all. And you don't want to teach your children this, then they become financial slaves. Teach your children to buy assets. If they complain, oh, I don't want to move to a smaller place. Well, be the leader. It's your job to be the leader. You tell them, well, I know you don't want to, but I'm going to show you why we're doing it. I'm going to teach you about money. This is why last week we had a talk about children. I talked about it on my audio podcast too, that just giving your children things and you think, oh, I'm giving them a good life. I just want to give them the best. You're not helping them. You're hurting them. You are hurting them if you spoil them. If you give them too much, you hurt them. You make them lazy. You make them spoiled. You teach them all of these bad ideas about money so that when they become adults, they just repeat all of these same mistakes. That's not helping them. So you want to help them, teach them to cut their own liabilities. If they come to you, they want to buy, I want the new PlayStation. For example, I want the new PlayStation, Dad. What's the answer? Well, if you really want to help them, I believe the best answer is, okay, all right, well, that's fine. Yeah, that looks cool, the new PlayStation. How much does it cost? I wonder, let's look. You can look online. Let's look online. How much does a PlayStation cost? And then you and your child together, you get online, and you look it up on Amazon.com or wherever, Sony or whatever, wherever you want to buy it. And you look and, it costs $300. And then what do you say? I'll buy it? No. You ask them a question. How could you make $300? I will help you, I'll coach you, but I'm not going to just buy this for you. You need to figure out a way to get that yourself. Then it's yours. Then you earned it. It's yours. So I don't mind if you get it, and I'll even start, try to coach you and help you and give advice. And then you let them start coming up with ideas, and their first ideas as kids will probably be more like jobs. I could clean this. I could go to the neighbors and cut their grass. Like I said, that's what I did as a kid. I'd cut people's grass. These are kind of like jobs, but it's kind of freelance too, right? At least they're working for it. And they're starting to think creatively. How can I create the money, not just beg for it? And then if you really want to help them, you can start teaching them these ideas about assets. So that once they make some money, you could say, well, what about starting a little business? What kind of little business could you start? And then anytime you need money, anytime you want to buy a toy, you could buy it. You wouldn't have to ask me anymore. You could get it. If you want a new bike in the future, if you create a business, a little small business, and you're part-time on the weekends, if you did that, then you could buy that. You could buy other toys too if you wanted to. You start teaching them to think this way. By the time they become teenagers, they're going to think like entrepreneurs. They're going to think like the rich. And they're going to have a much better financial life and much more freedom in their life as adults. Maybe in the short term, immediately, they're not going to thank you. Give me the PlayStation. But that's tough. Doesn't matter. Your job is not to please them all the time, right? They're going to be when they're adults, they're going to thank you. They will thank you. So that is my opinion on the issue of kids. Don't just give them stuff. They don't need, they need food, they need shelter, they need to be safe, all those basic things. They need love, most of all, and attention. But they don't need every luxury. They don't need every toy. They don't need all that. They don't need a huge house. They don't need all that stuff. They don't need new clothes. None of it. Okay, now, so this is a question... Alabez, again, has a good question, and it's a question I can't probably give advice on, but let's see. Do you think young people should try to learn the kind of things that you mention or focusing on jobs and career? Well, I think they should do what they want to do. So I don't think there's one right answer. So, for me, the answer was be an entrepreneur, for sure. I think for a lot of young people may have this idea. So they should just go for it and try it. If they fail, they fail. You can always get a job. Okay, this is the easy thing. This is the lie that schools tell. They scare these kids like, oh, you'll never get a job. It's not true. If you fail, it's no big deal. If you fail, you try to start a business. You work for 3 years on your own business. You work, and it fails. What happens? Do you die? No. You just go get a job. That's all you do. It's no big deal. It failed. I guess I need a job now. So then you go get a job. That's all. I don't understand. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's not a big deal. Nothing to fear. Now, on the other hand, I will say this. Some people, maybe a lot of people, don't really care about building a business. They don't want to do that. They don't like it. It's too uncertain, right? It's too they would just be happiest just working at a job and like in a certain career. They don't want to deal with running a business and all of that stuff. That's totally fine. That's fine. No problem. So if that's what they want as a young person, they're clear about that, then yeah, for sure, just go do that. That's okay. But still learn these ideas, because even as an employee, even working a job, keep your expenses low, save your extra money, and buy assets. You could just buy stocks and bonds if you wanted to. You got to learn about it. Don't just buy it, right? You got to learn about it. But you can be an employee and still buy assets. So I'm not saying, and Robert Kiyosaki also is not saying, you must be an entrepreneur. That's not true. There are a lot of people that just being an entrepreneur is too stressful. They don't like it. You know, for some people like me, being an entrepreneur is exciting. That we excited by the freedom and the creativity. But for others, they see that as very stressful, and they don't want to deal with it. That's also okay. So I wouldn't tell. For a young person, I would just ask them, which do you want? If they said, well, I think I might want to try a business. You know, I want to start my own business, but I'm afraid, then I would say, do it. Don't be afraid, just do it. So you got to know yourself. You have to know yourself. I think the main thing is make the decision from like your heart, not from fear. Too many people make a decision because of fear. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of being different. That's a bad decision. Here's the question. Should you spend money on traveling to see many countries, but there's still opportunity to put this money in an asset? I did. When I was young, I did. Was that the smartest financial decision? Maybe, maybe not. But I kept my expenses super low, and I learned a lot. It made me very, very independent, taught me to live simply, right? Because I was moving around a lot and going to different countries, and taught me how to live very, very, very simply. So I think there are great advantages to that. I think there's just great advantages in general to you can look at life experiences as investments. I do. I don't know what Robert Kiyosaki would say about this. I've never heard him talk about this. In my own opinion, life experiences are a good investment. So, starting a business, even if it fails, even if it does not become an asset, even if it loses money, a business, I think it's still a good investment because you learn so much from the experience. And next time, you're more likely to succeed. And you just become a stronger person. I think travel's like that. I think travel at least can be like that, where you learn so much, you become a stronger, wiser person. So any kind of investing in real world experience, I think is great. Another example would be an internship. An internship is basically working for no money, which some people think is crazy, but it can be a good idea. You can go work for somebody or some company for no money. Why would you do that? To learn, right? If you're new, you have no experience. People ask me sometimes about jobs. What should I do? I have no experience. Young people especially ask. And I just say, well, internship. Get an internship. Work for free for 1 year and learn. Make connections and learn. Then you'll be able to get a job that pays, better money or pays money. So I think that, that kind of real world experience, in my opinion, it's a good investment. But you have to decide. If you just focused on the money only, if you're only focused on the financial part, then maybe it's not an asset. It's probably not a financial asset. But I think of it as like kind of a mental and emotional asset. But probably Robert Kiyosaki would disagree with me. I don't know, but that's my opinion. Okay, here's a good question. Next. I want to take responsibility for my life, but still a lot of time I count on my parents for many things. I really want to change this habit. Any advice? This is from Breaking 98. Breaking Bad. Be more like Walter White. Without the meth. Don't do the meth stuff. Just a joke. Well, it's hard for me to answer. I don't know how old you are. So a lot of this depends on how old you are. If you're 9, if you're 12, if you're 16, or if you're 30, my answer would be different in each case. So if you're an adult, I would say, stop making excuses, just do it. You don't need anyone's permission. Stop relying on your parents. Go out, be independent, do what you need to do. And be responsible 100% for your own life. If you're over 18, 20, something like that, that's what I would tell you to do. If you're under 18, well, then you're still living at home with your parents. You're still, technically, you're still a youth or a child. And so you have to negotiate with your parents a little more about this. For those who are younger and still living at home, you're still, a kid, but you want to do more. I think you sit down and you start talking to your parents about this directly in a responsible way, more like an adult. They will start to see you more like an adult when you start to act more like an adult, right? So just start taking more responsibility in your life. Show them that you can do it. And then after you show them, sit down and say, I started this little small business in my spare time on the weekend, and it's making this much money. I'm trying to be more responsible, and discuss it with them. I think most parents would be happy, very happy to hear that. I know I would. Okay, great comment here. I didn't realize all these things before this year. I just now finished university. I never had a job before. I didn't study English before. Now I'm trying to build myself. Well, I was the same, School it's sad really that our school systems around the world are so far from real life, right? Real adult life. The gap is so huge now. They're nothing like the real world. So that we have people, I was going to say kids, but really, university, you're an adult, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old people coming out for the first time out of school with no idea about any of this, no idea about money, no idea about making decisions, being responsible about things. No idea about the real world, which is completely different. It works very differently than the way the school world works. And I think it's terrible. It's terrible. And so what happens is for most of these, like university graduates, there's a huge shock for a few years. There's a big shock. I had that shock. It happened to me at around age 22, where it's just like, oh, what do I do now? Right? You get out, I was really good in school. School was easy for me. So everything's so easy. And, everybody tells you exactly what to do. Write this paper, take this test, study this. Everything is told to you. You get your little grade. Now I got an A. That means I'm successful. Yay! And then you graduate and you get out and nobody tells you anything. Or they tell you different things and you have no idea which one's right. What do I do? What job should I take? I don't know. You have to decide. No one will decide for you. How do I get a job? How do I do well in a job interview? Nobody told me. How do I manage my money? Nobody told me. Suddenly you have to make all these life decisions and you have no experience. You have no real world knowledge about it. And it's a big shock. Suddenly, all the rules of school don't work anymore. So I understand the shock. I feel bad for, and this is why I really hope that, as parents, we have to try to teach some of these things because it's a terrible shock. And for me, don't feel bad because for me, it was several years. I'd say from 22 to 27, that was 5 years for me. I was just shocked. I worked really bad jobs with very little money. I was a security guard, right? Just guarding in this place at night, just making a tiny bit of money. for most of that time. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was kind of depressed. It was really, really tough. I got credit cards. I got in credit card debt. Some of the stuff Robert Kiyosaki talks about. It was a disaster. And this happens to lots of young people. So I would say, first of all, don't feel bad, because this happens to probably most. And the second thing is, you're doing the right thing. You're just jumping in to get real world experience. The good news is this, young people, don't be afraid. There's nothing to fear, okay? You're going to make mistakes. No big deal. Okay, like I said, for 5 years, I barely made any money. I survived. As long as you're eating, as long as you're still surviving, you're fine. You're learning, you're trying things. It will get better. So just how do you know what's the right decision? You don't always know. That's the truth, right? In school, there's the right answer and the wrong answer. You get the right answer, yay, you get a good grade. You get the wrong answer, then they give you the F. But in the real world, it's not clear. In the real world, there are many, many different answers. And it depends on the time, it depends on the person, depends on the situation. So you just make decisions, and if you don't like the result, just do something else. That's all. Just get as much life experience as you can. Just make decisions. Just decide and do. That's how you're going to learn. Don't fear. Don't be afraid. Okay, this is a challenge. Sunil says, I'm confused. How do I stop my personal expenses? I expend every day a lot of money for nutrition. Sounds like you're a bodybuilder, maybe. Protein, food, eggs, because I go daily to the gym for making muscles, right? Okay, got it. You got to do some research. Okay, we all have our areas in life where we spend money, right? So the first thing to do is So Sunil, you're doing a good job, because you know the area of life where you're spending a lot of money, right? We all need to do this. This is the first step I did. You got to look at your bank account or your whatever. If you're just doing cash, then start writing down every time you spend money. And then after a month or 2 months, look at it and start to notice, where are you spending the most money? Where could you possibly cut? Sunil has already noticed in his own life that he's spending a huge amount of money on food, because he's trying to build muscle, and for that he needs protein. Maybe taking protein powders and things, which can be very expensive. So Sunil, what you should do is start to research cheaper ways to do that. Like some natural bodybuilders, for example. Eggs, for example, can be cheap. I don't know about in your country, but instead of the protein powders, you maybe just buy natural foods. Just eat a lot of eggs, or find other, look for cheaper sources of protein that are still good. You got to get creative. Other people, like for me, I noticed my big expense was housing, was my apartment. It's like, I'm spending the most money on just where I live. That's why I decided to live in a car, in a van. Other people, it might be tech, or some people it might be entertainment. So you just have to sacrifice sometimes, and sometimes you have to get creative. But you can do it. I guarantee you can do it. There are answers out there. Okay, so Breaking Bad again, with another good comment. When I was in school, so Breaking Bad, you must be older then. When I was in school, I felt inferiority because some of the reasons that mentioned, yes. That feeling is still inside me. How to change it? Well, I'll tell you, one way to change it is, start reading biographies. This is the stories of rich people who did badly in school or who quit school. Because there are a lot of them, okay? Robert Kiyosaki did not go to college. Robert Kiyosaki, the writer of this book we're reading, did not do well in school. He's very honest about it. He did not go to college, did not go to university. He did not do well in school, And he became rich, and he became a big best-selling author. That school stuff doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter. So you just, you got to change your belief. You have a wrong belief. You have a wrong belief. You believe that school success equals life success, and that is not correct at all. And you can just find evidence, find real world examples of people who did badly in school and had huge, big life success. There are lots of them. Lots of them. In history, right now there are lots of them. And then also looking back in history, some of the richest men in the world ever did not do well in school, did not go to university, did not go to college. It's not necessary at all. So this is how, start feeding your brain with these stories every day, reading the books by these people or reading books about those people. And you'll start to change your belief then. You'll start to realize, that school stuff doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I can still be very successful. All right, I'll take a couple more questions and then I'm going to finish. Okay. Is it possible to create a WhatsApp group? We already have one. Follow me on Twitter, ajhoge, ajhoge. I'll retweet your comment. Okay, here's a liability question. Let's see if we can figure this out. Chuang says, I'm an insurance agent. Got it. My company wants me to buy a premium car for promoting my job and recruiting new members to my team. In this case, is the car a liability? So it's a really simple test. So I understand you want to buy a car for business, right? So you're going to drive the car around for business meetings and sales meetings and recruiting. You want the car to look nice, so you have a good, it's like kind of marketing, right? But, so is it a liability or is it an asset? It's a simple test. Each month or each quarter or each year, will that car cost money? Will it take money out of your bank account? Or will that put money in directly? It's a liability. It's going to take money out, right? You're going to have to get a loan probably. If it's new, you get a loan, you're going to have to pay for the car every month. It is a liability. Even if you buy it with cash, you have maintenance, you got to pay for the insurance on the car, which hopefully you get at a cheap rate if you're an insurance agent. But overall, it's an expense, right? It's going to cost you money every month. It is a liability. Now, does that mean you should buy it or not buy it? You have to decide, right? You will have some liabilities in your life. You want to reduce them as much as possible. Now, in this case, you're selling insurance. I don't know. It's really your decision. I don't know what I would do. Well, I do know what I would do. I would not buy it. I would buy the cheapest possible car. That's me. But for you, if you feel like you have to decide, but it is a liability. Just be clear about what it is. It's a liability. It's going to create an expense. And then you must just decide, is it a good decision to buy it? I can't decide that for you. You have to decide if it's still a good decision, but it's not going to add money to your bank, so it is a liability. That's all. There will be liabilities in your life. The trick is to get them as low as you can and increase the assets as much as you can. And the only way, you could become a monk. I guess that's one way to eliminate your liabilities completely, or a sadhu or something. But for most of us, we're still going to have some liabilities. Just try to reduce them as much as possible. Here's a language question. A couple more and then we're done. Do you recommend learning more than one language at the same time? It really just depends on how much time you have and how motivated you are. If you are super motivated and you have plenty of time every day, why not? Sure, go for it. If you want to, then I wouldn't tell you no. But if your time is limited, if your motivation is lower, then probably choosing one is enough. I think for most people, one's enough. One's a big enough challenge. English is enough of a challenge. But, again, you have to decide this yourself. Some people do it. And thanks, Alabe, for your comment. Thank you very much. All right, I think we are about finished. I'm going to just scan and see if there's one more question. All right, you're getting bad advice, so I'm going to give advice. This is a vocabulary question. I answer this question almost every show, but I'm going to answer it again. Zakir says, can anyone suggest me a good book about vocabulary? And some people are on the live chat are suggesting vocabulary books. And I'm going to say, don't buy them. Do not buy vocabulary books. Do not buy lists of vocabulary. It's a huge waste of time. I was just talking to someone chatting, not talking, typing, to one of my Twitter followers today, one of the Effortless English family, about this exact topic. You waste huge amounts of time doing that. These books give you lots of vocabulary with no context. Okay, there's no situation. At best, you get one little paragraph or a sample sentence, which is not enough, which means, number one, you're not really learning how to use that word correctly. You're not seeing it in a natural situation, a natural sentence and phrase and whole context. Context means situation. Number two, there's zero emotion. So you're just going to forget it. You're going to try to memorize these 500 words from this book. And of course, you always forget vocabulary. That's natural. But you're going to forget almost all of it trying to do it that way. And you're going to be bored. So how do you learn vocabulary? I will say it again. Read books, real books, not vocabulary books. Just go get a book. You want to learn a huge amount of vocabulary? Get a novel. Get a novel in English, a book, a whole huge book, 300-page book written for Americans or British people, and read the whole thing. Read all of it. I recommend you use an e-reader, like a Kindle or, whatever app. Because if you have put a dictionary on your app, whatever your e-reader is, and then when you see a new word, you tap that word. Right? Most devices, like a phone or a iPad, something like that, you can just touch the word you don't know, and boom, instantly, the dictionary shows you the meaning. And in your settings, you can have the dictionary. It could be an English dictionary. If you're advanced, you can just use the English dictionary. That's great. If you're less advanced, you could put a translation dictionary in your own language. That's also fine. But either way, you touch the word, boom, you see the meaning immediately. You could even highlight it if you want to with your finger. Then continue reading. Don't stop and, slow down your reading too much. That's why e-readers are great. You don't have to look at something else. You just touch it. You see the meaning. Got it. Keep going. You're probably going to forget it. But the good news is with the book, you're probably going to see it again. You're probably going to see most of those new words again and again and again. It's a 300-page book or 200-page book. A lot of those new words will repeat many times. And you're going to see it the second time. You're going to tap it again. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now I kind of remember. And you keep reading. And then the third time, oh, yeah, now I'm starting. You're going to start remembering it more and more and more. Here's the cool thing. You're seeing that word, you're learning that word in real situations, a real context, how it's really used, right? Within that real book, that real story, those real sentences, those real paragraphs. That word is therefore connected to the story, connected to all the other words. If If it's a good story, there's probably some emotion, some images in your mind connected to the word. All of these things help your memory. The other thing is, it's not boring. It's interesting because you're reading, hopefully. Choose a good book, but if you like the book, the whole time you're learning this vocab, you're reading an interesting story. You're not really focused on the words only. You're also getting the whole story. Or maybe you like nonfiction. You could read history books, like a big book about the history of the United States or something, or the history of England, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It could be sports. It could be anything you like. It can be fiction. It could be nonfiction. Reading. You finish one book, read another book, and then another, and then another. You just keep reading books. Reading. That will improve your vocabulary so much more than any of these vocabulary study books that you buy. Those books are boring. Those books are not effective. And there's no story. Don't do it. Okay? Just read books. You get so many more benefits. And you'll enjoy it much, much more. And by the way, there is research about this. Check out Dr. Krashen's website if you want more about the research. There's a lot of research that shows this is indeed the most powerful way to grow your vocabulary, through simply reading books. And I'm going to end today. That's all. I hope you enjoyed today's book club. That's why we're doing the book club, by the way. I'm trying to encourage you to read books. I hope you will go buy this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, by Robert Kiyosaki. Buy the book. Watching the videos with me, you learn the basic ideas. So I'm helping you understand the book, but you will get the big vocabulary benefit by reading the whole book yourself. You can read it a few times. You can get the audiobook and listen to it also. So that's why we do the Effortless English Book Club. Listen and learn it with me, and then go read it yourself. Read each chapter after you listen to my explanation. Read the book yourself. This will grow your vocabulary. All right, join my VIP program, Learn English with me. Yes, vocabulary, but also speaking, listening, all of that. Join my VIP program at effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com.